Hi, guys, to our latest podcast. We have with us Sarah Griffiths, and she has a diploma in clinical homeopathy. I hope I said that correctly. And she's an animal nutrition specialist. So, Sarah, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Um, I started out as an animal trainer, actually, just like you. So I
Nice.
worked, my first job, very first job ever was as a 17-year-old. I loved animals so much. So I started working in a pet store. So that was my first experience. I realized that's not where I really wanted it to be. Um, and I got really into learning about species appropriate nutrition through my training job. I apprenticed with a, a fairly well known animal trainer that works in the film industry in BC here in Canada. And he had domestic animals, but also a lot of wild animals. So we had wolves, we had big cats, we had a whole wide variety. And then we had the dogs and the domestic cats as well. And I've always been such an animal lover, and I couldn't really understand. That was my first line of questioning as to like why the wolves were eating like chicken carcasses and liver and beef and all of these meat based items, and then the dogs were getting fed this very low quality dry food, and same with the cats. And the big cats were fed meat, and the little cats were fed this dry food. And I was so interested by the divide of that, because these domesticated animals come from these other species. So, and then I got my first dog, and I realized very quickly that I didn't want to do dry food with him. He just was not thriving the way that I thought a young dog should thrive. And so I decided of my own accord to switch him onto like a home prepared diet.
Okay.
This was like 25 years ago. So it was like witchcraft. So I did go to my vet and I asked if there was any like recipes that they could recommend for me to start with. And they just were like horrified that I would even ask this question. They were just like, no, you're gonna hurt your dog, and your dog is gonna get sick, and they're not gonna grow properly, and it's really, really bad, and there's lots of bacteria and all of these things. So, um, and I just in my heart, I just did not feel that way. So I questioned it. I went looking, I went researching. There was not a lot of research at the time on raw food at all
No.
for domestic animals. And my dog at the time, I used to walk to work down this very busy city street to get to my job. And on the way, I my dog actually dragged me into this veterinary clinic, and there's a big sign in the window that said feed your dogs bones and raw food. And I was like, oh, this is what I want to do, and this is a vet clinic, and this is so amazing. So my dog was actually the one that showed me the way here. And then I ended up meeting my mentor, who her name is Julianne Lee. She's from the Adored Beast Apothecary, so she's got quite a large company in both Canada and the U.S. now. She's also a classical homeopath, and has a whole like supplement line and probiotic line for animals. So I spent 10 years working in her clinic. Um, Ended up being the nutritional consultant for the clinic, working with the vets, seeing all the case diagnostics, recommending diets, putting diet plans together. The vets would sign off on them and review them and stuff. So that's basically it's totally not a school-based way of learning, but within that, I was also doing my classical homeopathic degree. So I was doing pathology, anatomy, plus the veterinary clinic,
Mhm.
plus the human clinic. So I was getting all of this information embedded into me at a very young age. And then I did for a while consider if I wanted to become a veterinarian. And then I decided, because of all this information that I had learned, that veterinary school was going to be very, very, very difficult mentally for me to go through that process. So I decided to work clinically instead and be supported by some really amazing vets. And then I feel that through that experience, at this point, I've taken on clients of my own, and I work with a lot of veterinarians all over the world. So now I'm primarily online, and I do private cases, but I'm also starting to teach a lot more.
Great.
And keeping up with my articles, and just trying to get into the teaching phase rather than so many private clients. But I do love working with the private clients, because once you see enough cases of the same thing, like say a skin disease or gut disease, which are two of the things that I see the most with dogs, you do get to understand what the normals are and what the conventional route looks like and what that pathway looks like in terms of long-term health, and then what it looks like if we make these very slow, more integrative changes over time. It takes longer, and the owner has to have some level of dedication as well to the process, because even though you can have lots of ups and downs, so we always try to be as gentle as possible when we're kind of phasing them into, especially a new diet that they're not used to, right? So, I do specialize primarily in cat and dog digestive disorders. That's one of probably the number one thing that I see. Lots of allergies, and lots of animals with cancer at young ages. So, and this is, there are many reasons for that, but diet is really foundational. So even though I'm a homeopath and I love homeopathy, and it's such a powerful tool, we also need to ensure that those remedies have the best chance of working. And if there are obstacles to helping that animal be in homeostasis, which diet would be probably one of the more serious ones, and one of the ones that we can control in the environment. If that is constantly a daily insult to the animal, especially to their gut and their immune system, it can cause other forms of integrative medicines or approaches to not work as well, because you're creating daily systemic inflammation, because the body is having to deal with this processed input. So that's, and now there's so much science on the benefits of raw versus dry, and how amazingly different it is, how different the microbiome is compared to kibble fed dogs and cats versus dry fed dogs. And it's starting to slowly become more scientific rather than a fad.
Very slowly, very, very slowly. I don't know how it is in North America.
Probably better than where you are.
Where I am, it's let's put it this way. If you feed anything other than kibble, you're almost painted as some sort of cruel person, and how could you kind of, and there's a few vets that have no problem with it, right? Some actually see the benefits. So I was in the veterinary school teaching a safe handling course to all the instructors, and I took my dog Ninja with me, and I had him lying down for an hour and a half under the whiteboard and was lecturing. And then we had an intermission where I did a demo with him, first in obedience. And then everybody posed with pictures with him. He was a beautiful jet black German Shepherd.
Oh,
And people would put their arm around his neck and have picture taken and all of that. And then I did a protection demo with him right after. And people were like, I was just hugging this dog,
yes.
and got the heart effect after the fact.
Yes.
And then we went back inside and I put him under the whiteboard again. And then, okay, Platz. And he stayed there for another hour and a half with me lecturing. And then at the end of it, I asked them, seeing that I have all the experts here, how old is this dog? And the closest they got was 4.5. And I said, no, he's 8. And everybody's like, wow, how could he be looking like this at 8? There's no gray on the nose or anything. And then there was a young vet in the back that said, you feed raw. I said, yes. She said, that could be the only way he's looking like that. And it turns out they have a youth research or a student research program in the vet school, and she's involved in a long-term study on raw food.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, it's very interesting.
So that was, and she immediately, she came out and said, yeah, you feed raw. This is the only way he could look the way he's looking, right? Because it's only early days. I think they're only a couple of years into the 10-year study.
Yes.
But they already discovered that most commercial kibble contains chemicals that promote aging. And that's why you see dogs that are 7 years old that the nose starts to go gray and all of this. And me growing up, if any dog food was used, it was freeze-dried raw.
Yes. Right.
And it came in big 50-kilo, agricultural, how would you translate it? Agricultural co-op.
Yes, like a big.
In a big white paper bag, and it was commercially available to farmers for their dogs and all that. And that was freeze-dried and dehydrated raw food. You have to add water to it, wait a little, 15 minutes for it to swell up, and then it was fed to the dogs. I myself went to a local butcher and told him, okay, this is what I can use, this is what I can't use. So when he has his big chopping block, he has 2 bins instead of 1. So whatever I can't use and he does discard, including his paper towels, went into there, and everything else went into my bin. And I would collect it twice every second day or something.
Very nice.
I would feed my dogs with it. That is anything from raw green tripe, which it's not nice. It's not nice to handle, but dogs loved it.
Yeah, and it's really good.
Spines to chew on and stuff like that. Some organ meat, some kidneys, So if the kidney was accidentally damaged in butchering the animal, and it had a cut, and I can't put it in the showcase, I would get it.
That's so nice that you had access to.
And I would feed those things, and I did it because it was free.
Yes.
But also because it was a way of the dogs always look good and worked well, so why not? I wasn't by any stretch of the imagination scientific about it, and I don't think I'm still not
really
scientific about it.
Yeah.
So people ask me a lot, how do you determine how much food to give your dog? I said, I'm looking at my dog.
Yeah.
And if I find, okay, you're getting a little chunky, I give you less. And if, okay, you lost a little pound or 2, right, I give you a little more today. And so I adjust it daily, because we don't eat the same amount every day either. And so it's a constant adjustment. And then sometimes you can't get something, so you put something else to compensate for it.
Yeah, and that is kind of, there is a point where too much science is not good. And to going back to, what I teach my clients is to use your intuition. And to do exactly what you're saying, looking at the actual animal that's in front of you. What are they doing? How are they feeling? How much energy do they have? What's their weight look like? What's their body condition? Do they have any, things going on, health wise? And how, what can you do to support them in that time? Because it changes from the time they're puppies to adults to seniors. There's a whole process that happens, and so many different ways of feeding and foods that you can rotate in. That a lot of people get really, really obsessed with the AFCO, like the American Association rules of regulate, or their requirements, nutritional requirements for dogs and cats. And this is something that I teach because in veterinary world, that's really the only thing that exists. It's not balanced every meal, every day, all the time. It's not balanced.
But
it's gonna hurt your dog. So and then there's the other side where you get veterinarians telling you stories that a puppy was fed on steak and nothing else and ended up with rickets and deformed skeleton and things like that. So but those cases are so few and far between, and they have to be going on for such a long period of time usually. And you do have to, there are things that you have to add to balance the diet correctly, but it really isn't about doing it in every single meal. And that's something that's very important to me for people to understand, especially when I'm working with them, because a lot of them come and they have all this info, I have an intake form and they all this information and all the exact amounts of everything that they're doing, and it's very exact, and which is amazing because it obviously shows like how much they care about their dog. But at the same time, it's you could see the stress level that might bring to have to be so vigilant about it all the time. So I try to help people, like, especially with adult dogs, over a 2-week period, you can create balance over that 2-week period by using a wide variety of different foods. And that's how we eat. And that's how dogs would eat as well. And one of the things that I really got into, I do have an article with some of the research on my website. It's about what dogs should really be eating. And I went into the very specific studies that were done on wolves and what wolves do. Their eating patterns change during the seasons. So the wintertime, their main prey is large prey like elk, very large animals. And the reason that happens is because the temperature is so cold that they can take down a large animal like that, and then they can preserve it in the snow for several days and eat that animal for several days without it spoiling. In the summer, if they were to do that, they would really have maybe 24 to 36 hours before that would no longer be appropriate. So the energy output on hunting that elk would be kind of wasted because it takes a lot of energy and coordination to take down an animal that size that has a lot of endurance. And so in the summertime they actually switch over to small prey, like rabbits and birds, like that. So, and in the fall they eat a lot of fallen fruit, cherries, apples, berries, all kinds of berries, whatever's around, blueberries, and everything's fallen. So a lot of it is partially fermented. So that's actually a really natural way for a dog to eat that kind of food, is in a partially fermented state. Plus, it gives them that probiotic intake. Plus, they eat a lot of grass. They've studied quite extensively with coyotes, wolves. They actually intake, especially certain times of the year, quite a lot of roughage in the form of grass. So they're actually giving themselves these prebiotic fibers to support their gut. And then they have these big seasonal changeovers. And it's almost like they're like refreshing their system so that they can switch over to this different kind of workload with the hunting and the different types of meat they're going to be eating. And it's just this natural process that they cycle through every single year over this 365 days. And what I've really realized is that this, with people, it's very popular to do like seasonal local eating and things like that. And what I've found is that the research is showing that your microbiome does the same thing on a small, tiny scale. It actually changes on a 24-hour cycle, on a 28-day cycle with the moon, which is crazy. And then also on this 365-day cycle and longer ones as well. So for us to eat in relation to the environment and what is actually available in the environment at that time, it actually interfaces us with the environment and reduces oxidative stress, supports our gut, supports our immune system, reduces histamine responses, allergies, inflammation, all of these things. It's just a natural way of cycling things. So when we get feeding a dog the same thing every single day, you're not actually using the environmental input to help that dog to interface with their environment. So that's kind of going a little bit deeper down the rabbit hole with nutrition, but you can actually use nutrition in that way. And the only way to do that is through variety and through intuition, basically.
Right. So I have noticed, for instance, I have a neighbor who has a very large mango tree.
Oh, nice. Very
and
nice.
And it hangs over into
I wish I had a neighbor with a mango.
It hangs over into my yard. So
nice.
Normally in their food, I would incorporate some fruits, some bananas, some what we have here that is safe. Because like strawberries and blueberries are very expensive here because they don't grow here. So, and during that time where they pick up mangoes that fall into the yard, while I'm trying to stop them from eating them because it's these small mangoes and one dog, she eats it complete.
Oh, wow.
And then vomits out only the seed.
Oh, wow.
I don't know how she does it. And others, they would just eat the fruit and leave the seed, but I hope they don't accidentally eat one. Yes. But during that time, I give them a lot less. I don't put fruits in their daily food.
Yeah.
Because they get a decent amount already.
For sure.
Yeah? So right now it's out of season because we don't really have 4 seasons here. We have 2. We have rainy season and dry season. So we don't get the change in food so much.
Right.
But so now I'm giving them bananas. Break up a banana in the bowl and mix that in. And different types of meat. And then, I'm in need of some information on other stuff like what bones.
Right. That's a big question.
Because all I'm hearing here is bones are the devil. Right? So
yes.
But I know if a dog kills a pheasant, they're eating the whole thing. And live. So why is chicken bone so bad?
Yes. Yeah. So that's a very, very it's I could answer that in a lot of different ways. So I'll try and make it simple.
Thank you.
So the number one thing to remember is that cooked bones are not the same as raw bone.
Right.
They chemically change. They become very, very brittle. They're actually not even that nutritionally valuable because all of the good stuff is taken it goes into the broth.
Mm-hmm.
That's how it goes into the broth. So bone broth is a great addition, but you would obviously take those cooked bones out of there. So the bones splinter in a very specific way when they're cooked. And this happens also if dogs, shove them under something and it's really hot where you are. And then they go and find them later and they're really dried out.
Mm-hmm.
So I've had an incident with one of my dogs where he put a rib bone somewhere underneath the pot, and then he dug it back out again and he cracked off this big piece, and it shattered, and he had to have surgery because he perforated his gut. That's the only incident that I've had in 25 years of problems with. So I don't feed a lot of rib bones, but a lot of dogs do eat rib bones and they eat them just fine. The most important thing to remember with bones is what animal it's coming from and what animal you're feeding it to. So if you have a very small dog that has a very soft mouth and is a kind of a light, like very delicate eater, you can do quite a good variety of bones with that dog, like chicken necks, rib bones, little slices of femur, little slices of knuckle bones and things like that. If you have a dog like a Rottweiler who is like huge and they love food and they just want to consume everything whole, then you would have to adjust not only for the size of the dog, but the eating behavior of that dog. So this might be something very interesting to you because you're a dog trainer. So I always take into consideration the eating habits and behaviors of that dog, like the natural way that they want to eat. So we have all these devices for, dogs on dry feed where, they slow feeders and things like that. And that's because these dogs are like inhaling their food literally, and it can cause a lot of problems. So the same problems can occur with bones and even with raw food. And dogs can choke. If they're given a bone that's too small for their body size and their throat size, they can swallow it whole and they can choke. So you have to make sure that with these very large dogs, I've always had like Mastiffs and Great Danes and Shepherds and things. So I have a lot of experience with dogs that are like carburetors and they just want to consume. They're like, as soon as you give them their food, they go insane, right? So
all my dogs.
Yes. So in the cases of those dogs, I always offer like very large prey items. So with chicken, always raw. You can do like chicken backs and necks. You can do whole chickens. I do quarter chickens and half chickens with my dog now. She's 80 pounds or so. But she loves like chicken legs, chicken thighs, half chickens, chicken backs and necks. She goes to town on those, and she has been eating those her whole life. I've been feeding those for 25 years. Because poultry bones are hollow, they're very easy for dogs to digest. So you'll notice if you're a raw feeder, you'll notice that, and this is something that's scary for a lot of new raw feeders, is depending on what type of meat you're feeding and how much bone you feed that day, the poops could be like anywhere from black to like a very light, like crumbly yellow color. And if it's really, really dry and really, really crumbly, that's all the bone that's digested down into like a powder. And this is power of the canine gut, is that it is able to do this job. If a dog is not able to do that job, which sometimes they're not if they're a kibble fed dog, then we have to slowly switch them over to have the capacity to do that, because their gut is so different when they're eating dry food versus when they're eating raw. So you can have a lot more digestive concerns if you're feeding bones with dry. And some dogs, it's fine and they have no problems.
Right.
But some people will try to start feeding bones to a kibble-fed dog, and then they have this massive diarrhea problem, or something much worse, God forbid. So you always have to consider, like, how is my dog's microbiome health, how, like, their gut health? Do they have diarrhea or constipation on a regular basis? What kind of eater is my dog? And how can I make this like the safest and most beneficial process for my dog? And how's their dental health? Things like that too, because if they have any sort of dental, needs that need to be met, like extractions and things like that, you could run into issues feeding hard bones, right?
Okay.
So you always have to kind of start with what dog you're feeding, and then what bones are available to you. And with these big guys, what I usually recommend is like whole knuckles, which are like this big. So from beef or from buffalo. And there's been some nice studies done on those that show very significant changes in the amount of calculus that builds up on the teeth. Like they'll show the before and after of how much calculus can be removed just from eating one knuckle, like chewing on one knuckle bone. And these dogs with these very big, wide, strong jaws, not only does it help with strengthening the jaw, like especially if you're doing all this kind of protection like that, that chewing action actually stimulates the cranium and the brain, and it actually releases happy endorphins like dopamine, serotonin, all of that kind of stuff. So there's multiple benefits. The other thing that I would do with a large dog like that would be like half chickens, or even whole chickens, depending on how hard they're working. And what you should see with those bones is that they have a very light, kind of drier, lighter colored poop. There won't be any bones like coming out of your dog. And if there is, there's a major digestive issue going on, and you have to do something about it.
I always you always see those posts online and with veterinarians, don't give your dog bones, and dogs don't digest bones, and also, is that why some of the poop is white?
Yes.
Because they don't digest it into a powder? So
it's very, once you get used to feeding raw, you could very clearly see that it is very, very, very possible for them to do that, and very natural. And also, because they're carnivorous, especially as puppies, there's so much controversy about feeding raw to puppies. But Dr. Ian Billinghurst is one of the pioneers in like, feed your puppies bones, because that's the only way you can guarantee that they're really not going to get hip dysplasia. And he did a whole entire, like, I've seen presentations of his, and he had his own magazine for a while called Carnivora. And he published this beautiful article, which I can't find online anywhere, but he was talking about how, calcium from bone, from like a bioavailable source for a dog, will actually, and having all that collagen that's attached to the joint bones and all that stuff, is all going to help your dog, reduce, especially with these big guys, reduce the chances that your dog is going to have hip dysplasia. And that hip dysplasia is not necessarily a genetic problem, even though we can kind of test for it through the parents and things like this. There's also a great study out of Finland now through the Dog Risk program, the Dog Risk Foundation, I think they're called, or the Dog Risk Project. And Dr. Bjorkman is the head veterinarian on that project, and she works out of the University of Helsinki. And she's been doing research on raw food for about 15 years now. And one of her papers is on German Shepherds and the risk of them developing hip dysplasia eating kibble versus raw, and it's significantly higher with kibble fed German Shepherds. So she did it specifically with these dogs that have like this very bad reputation for developing this disease. She's also done a huge survey style study on 16,000 homes in and around Finland that feed their dogs raw, because it's quite a lot more common to feed raw in Europe. And her questionnaire was quite large, and she was trying to determine how many of those households believed that they or their family members had contracted either E. coli, salmonella, or listeria, or some kind of scary bacteria, and become ill because of their dog's raw food. And what she found, out of 16,000 households that feed raw every day, have children crawling around on the ground, touching the dog, all these things that they say is, your kid's going to die and grandma's going to die. Everyone's going to die.
Your dog is going to shed salmonella.
Right. So she found that 0.04% of those households had maybe a little bit of an indication that possibly they could have contracted some kind of bacterial infection from their dog's raw food specifically. So that is like a very insignificant number when we look at the numbers for, dogs that get cancer, which is basically 1 in 2. That's 50% of dogs are going to get cancer in their lifetime. And one of the studies that she's done is to show that metastasis is very influenced by inflammation, and inflammation is very influenced by diet and processed foods. So, if we look at all the statistics, not just the ones that the vets learn in school, and we, kind of zoom out more and we look at more of this research that's coming out on, what it looks like between these two types of feeding styles, it's, I know that most veterinarians are not shown these scientific papers, but when they are shown these papers, which are becoming there's many of them now, many of them are starting to go, hey, interesting. Like, at least they're like, wow, there's science on this, right? And sometimes they're so analytical that they need the science show that it's true. So it's in dog and cat world, it's getting better. There's way more veterinarians that are pro raw, or just fine with raw, even if they're conventional.
Yeah,
especially in North America.
I've met some here too. That one in particular says, "Mark, I'm with you on this. My problem is I don't have my own clinic. I'm working for another vet, and I can't see it."
Yes, and there's lots of politics
because they're selling chow in the clinic. So, and it's one particular brand that I will not mention, but
y'all know what it is.
any client asked me, I said, yeah, so you're feeding cancer in a bag, and they look at me like, how can you say?
No,
I said that's what it is. As far as I'm concerned, that's what it is. You know where the legal? A few years ago, I went on AFCO's website, and I kind of researched what the legal requirement is for 100% complete and balanced. A dog or 100 dogs have to survive 21 weeks on eating nothing but this food. It's okay if they die in week 22, for as long as they made it 21 weeks and they're still breathing, it's 100% complete and balanced.
Yeah. And the only things that they actually use for blood assays, like blood work on those dogs, is their CBC, which is their white blood cell count, and their red blood cell count, which makes no sense because you can't see their electrolytes, you can't see their liver function, you can't see their kidney function. And also with young dogs are master compensators. They can compensate for years eating a very terrible diet. As long as it has enough calcium in it. That's pretty much, the they have such a high requirement for calcium that all of these fearful things about rickets and calcium deficiencies and bone problems, as long as you have enough calcium in that diet, you have enough fat and protein, and it doesn't matter where that fat and protein really comes from. It could be from totally species inappropriate things. And then if you really dive into it and you look at the ingredients, I have the book on my desk right here. This is all of the requirements, all of the definitions for all of the ingredients that can be used in pet food legally, as far as ACO is concerned. And they have definitions for peanut hulls, soybean hulls, basically like sawdust.
Mm-hmm.
That's basically what you're feeding your dog. There's a lot of like preservatives that are allowed to go in. There's a lot of types of oils that are very omega-6 rich that can cause a lot of, it's very pro-inflammatory. And then they'll, you know, on the bags, a lot of them will say, you know, omega-3s are added to this food to balance out the omega-6s, but omega-3s don't hold up in a bag. The only way they hold up, really, they even get degraded if they're frozen. So basically you have to feed, if you're going to feed omega-3s, you have to feed fresh fish, fresh frozen. Those are the best ways to feed because those oils can oxidate so quickly. The other thing that's really, really unfortunate, which is, you know, there is some mention in AFCO about it, but the rate at which animals are dying and getting ill from aflatoxin poisoning, which is a type of toxin that is outputted by fungal growth on grain. So if you're feeding grains or legumes, you can have very high aflatoxin amounts in your food. And these companies, these big companies, they don't have to test every batch for that unless they're super, you know, diligent. They can test for it every 6 months. They can also change the ingredients in the bag and not tell you for 6 months while they switch over their labeling. So there's all of these things that you literally don't know what you're feeding your dog. It's just personally, I can't do it.
And commercial dog food started in the 30s by taking grain that was no longer fit for human consumption,
Right.
and instead of disposing of it, baked it into some flakes and made dog food out of it.
Right.
So
yes.
it's
and
right.
Then the market is so massive that everyone was like, "Oh, this is so convenient. This is great."
Yeah, and then my question is, look at all the big food companies.
Yeah.
And then ask yourself, why is it that all the biggest dog food companies are companies that make human food?
Right.
Why all of a sudden are they going into dog food? What do you think is the reason for that?
Yeah.
One of the reasons is if you have ingredients that you can no longer use for human consumption, you would have to pay a company to dispose of them. So instead of doing that, it is all getting rendered and goes into dog food and making a profit with it. That is really
so it's basically garbage. It's what you're feeding, literally.
Yeah.
So when you really think about that, and you think about, you know, what you would allow yourself to eat as well, you know, there's so many more regulations for human food, but the quality of human food in North America is also very low too, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, if the quality of human food is here and these are the regulations for human food, it's like a wild west for dogs and cats. And the only way to really ensure that you know what you're feeding and you know that your dog is getting nutritional value from, you know, real food is to do it yourself. And there are a lot of companies now, like the commercial raw food companies, that are doing a good job. But, there's all this controversy about the AFCO balancing and all this stuff. And I still feel like that's, it's a piece of the puzzle. We can use it as a tool to, get an idea of, where these values should be. But I think because they're all minimum values, it's just the amount of this nutrient that you need to avoid nutritional deficiency. It is not the amount that the dog needs to thrive and live to be old and healthy and have no arthritis and et cetera, right? Like there's a big gap in that logic. We don't look at, like when I'm feeding dogs, I don't look at minimums. There are some maximums, like with fat soluble vitamins, like vitamin A and D and E, where you could overdose and it could be bad, but it's very hard to do that actually. You would have to be pretty dedicated to actually cause those problems with real food. But supplementing, you could do that. But, I'm always looking at like, what do dogs actually eat? How do they eat? And what is this dog telling me physically, energetically,
Yes.
what it needs? Like if, there's a lot of ways to indications for like what nutrients might be low. If you, for example, this is just one of many, you have a dog that you feel is not really understanding the training that you're teaching, slower, not really fully like on it, not quick, and they're having trouble comprehending the exercises. It takes a long time for them to learn. That would be an indication to me that that dog is probably having an omega-3 deficiency and would need more fish, more omega-3 input. And a lot of times you'll see that dog can actually learn better. And there's lots of science on that as well. So that's just one of many things where you could say, dogs with really super itchy atopic dermatitis. A lot of these dogs are iodine deficient and zinc deficient. They're eating these balanced AFCO diets, but they're completely deficient in these nutrients, right?
Yeah.
And if you're iodine deficient for long enough, you can run into hypothyroidism, which is also a huge epidemic in dogs. So there's all of these things that, you can look at all of these diseases as separate, genetically predisposed things, but genes are, if you study epigenetics, that's the science that says that your genes don't just do random things. They're not pre-programmed. They take in information from the environment and then they do their thing based on that. So diet, stress levels, environment of all different types, air quality, water quality, all of these things. So that's what determines what happens to those genes and how they express. So anyone who can tell me that diet doesn't matter, or diet, this kind of diet is the way to go. A processed diet is heavily shown to be cause major dysfunction in humans. And it's no different for dogs. Like that is actually science to me. And the other science is very industry driven science, which isn't actually science. Because if you're doing studies that are predetermined as to what you want the outcome to be and funded by a party that is invested in having this outcome so that they can teach it to this mass network of professional animal people, that's not how science is done. That's not real science.
And oftentimes I have stopped blaming veterinarians for not knowing about nutrition, because not so much here, but in other countries, universities that teach veterinary medicine don't really employ nutritionists. So they get guest lecturers that are funded and paid for by dog food companies that will tell them what they need to hear in order to promote the product later.
Yes.
And
You got it.
that is the fallout, right?
And the
So
thing that I deal with a lot with, my clients is, people come to me because they're choosing to do something different. They don't want
mhm.
to do it the conventional way. They feel in their heart, their gut, whatever, that this is not how they want to take care of their dog. But oftentimes they will come and they will tell me, you know, asking their vet is asking, like, if they're seeing a nutritionist, that they need to see a board certified veterinary nutritionist, or it's not actually a real nutritionist. And so for me, I don't have that certification. I'm not a veterinarian. But because I'm not a veterinarian and I haven't gone through that schooling, I've put my time into clinical analysis, clinical experience, field experience, training and raising dogs, reading dogs. I have this whole field experience that, is a completely different mindset,
goes a very long way.
right? Yes.
So so
So, to think about uh, how much veterinarians and these integrative practitioners have to offer each other is just so massive. And a lot of the veterinarians that I work with, who are, open minded and have um, they want to learn, they want to keep learning, which is kind of really the only prerequisite to any being good at anything, right? Um, but they're willing to do the diagnostics. Like I say, hey, we should test this dog for hyperthyroidism. We should send it to this lab because this vet is an endocrinologist. She's not just a vet. She knows what she's talking about. So, and then some of them will be like, wow, I didn't even know this lab existed. And then we can, like, they can take the blood, they can send the blood, they can help to prescribe the hypothyroid
mm,
medication. That's what's needed. And then we work together. And I have some vets that, this kind of goes to show the tunnel vision of it. Sometimes I have this one vet that is lovely, and she deals with a lot of cats. And I've helped a couple, two or three of her clients now with cats that have been diagnosed with hyperthyroidism and kidney failure, which is it's kind of a triad thing where they can get like kidney failure, heart disease, and hyperthyroidism all at the same time.
mm,
And then when they get put onto hyperthyroid medication to bring their thyroid levels down, then they can start to have more kidney dysfunction or heart dysfunction.
oh
And so
wow.
there's a triad of things that they don't get taught in veterinary school. But I've been seeing this in clinic for like years and years and years, like 20 years. After a while, you see enough of these hundreds of cases where you have to adjust the thyroid medication based on this triad. You can't just do it based on the thyroid levels. You also have to do it based on the kidney levels, right? And then we also have these other, homeopathic support. We have supplements we can use. And so I've had these outcomes where clinically they take the blood, they see the cat asymptomatic, but seemingly having this terrible problem. But the cat is actually looking at the cat is fine, like totally fine, like not skinny, not peeing and drinking
Mm,
tons, looking great. So the vet now she sends me all of her hyperthyroid cats because she
mm,
thinks I'm like a whiz with these hyperthyroid cats. There's only one thing that I, have a protocol for, but it's just because I have this clinical experience in this very holistic way where we haven't really overdone it with the drugs. We've done a lot with diagnostics, and we look at diagnostics first. We look at the case. We have all these extra tools. You know, our clients are all on raw, so the outcomes are completely different. So
yeah.
you need to create these different protocols that are not medically based, and you see these amazing results over and over and over again. And then you can say, okay, this isn't just a anecdotal, like one or two cases. This is a thing that we
Yeah.
can use. help a lot of animals. So,
Yeah,
you know,
experience is difficult to beat,
it really is. Yeah.
right? So it I have learned over the years to just observe my dog. So if I see that the dog is scraping away the lawn and starts eating some dirt, okay, the dog needs some more minerals, right? So we
Mhm.
grate some carrots over the food, we boil some pumpkin and mix it in, and then the behavior stops.
Yes.
And it might be very old fashioned, but I have learned that if your dog's coat is nice and shiny, the dog is healthy,
It's a very good indicator.
right?
Definitely.
And if I'm looking at my dog Foz, he is glistening in the sun. This
Yeah.
When people look at the videos on my social media, they say, "I love his shiny coat."
Oh, shiny. I know.
Yeah, and it's just like, to me, it is all my dogs look like this, right? That's how it's supposed to be,
Not a mistake. Not
you
just that
know.
one dog.
And so when I then get lectured, about giving raw food and things like, I have a lot of clients that eat the food that you recommend, and their coat is dull, and they don't not really happy working, and you know they're not the same. They don't have the same energy level, and I know genetically they're supposed to have the drive. I know the parents and grandparents and so forth, but this dog is not really the same way. And then when the client goes and does feed raw, then a month later they have a different dog, and all of a sudden the dog is full of energy, and you know it's a, oh my gosh, I didn't know.
And I'm sure you
you
see
know
that so clearly because of the type of work that these dogs are doing, that there's, strenuous component to it. They need to be in the best shape they can be, more than a house dog or a pet dog, right? They need to have that extra
yeah,
nutrition and that very specific, um, input to be able to express themselves fully. And I do see that a lot too. I saw that when I worked, with the wildcats and the domestic cats. The domestic cats were getting kidney failure and all these terrible heart disease and all these things. And the big cats would be like 25 years old and they're still going and they're a little rickety, but they're old, and um, just to see the difference in the longevity, especially clinically when you see a lot of really sick animals or you see animals switching over from one kind of food to another, and they do have a pathology on the dry food, a serious disease process of some sort, and you see these dogs, like you said, a month later, it's like a miracle, really. A lot of times it is. So, but if you're in clinic and you're not practicing that, and you only see the random case here and there, and then you see, the dog that chokes on a bone and has to have it removed, or grabbed a cooked chicken off the counter or whatever. That's not the same as feeding raw. If your
hmm,
dog stole a cooked chicken and ate it and got sick, like that's not the same as feeding raw diet. so
yeah,
there's a lot of misinterpretation about what raw feeding is and what it isn't. Um, and I feel like the open-mindedness it really is starting to come through because there's more veterinarians, seeing the benefits.
I
And
believe it's I believe it's more the younger veterinarians that now heading in that direction,
yeah, except
from
for
what I
Dr.
can see.
Billinghurst, we have to, give props to, because he's an older guy, but he's he's very, very adamant that raw is the way to go. And he teaches a lot of veterinarians to to do that as well. And
Okay.
and there's another really great veterinarian named Dr. His name, I have his book right here. It's a fairly new book called Dr. Connor Brady. and his book is called Feeding Dogs, and it's an essential book if you want to get into the science of why raw is so beneficial, and all of the research that he could find it. This book took him 10 years, right? And he's very adamant about raw feeding as well, and basically irrefutably explains why dry food is just, very, very prehistoric. And it's not actually the new, it's actually the new way of feeding. It's not the old way of feeding. We've all, 100 years ago, people fed their dogs raw food.
Mm-hmm.
So, and for hundreds of generations before that. So to say that we have enough information, now we do have enough information to say that genetically there are certain lines and breeds of dogs that are being destroyed because not only are they not being bred very nicely, but they're also being fed very terribly. And now there's a lot of studies showing that can actually have generational effects. So with my dog, we bred her, had 2 litters, all raw fed dogs. She was fed totally raw the whole time she was pregnant, while she was nursing. All of her puppies were switched right onto raw. And then now they're all, the 12 of them are eating raw, and they're 4 or 5 years old. This is one of the things they say: you can't feed a pregnant dog raw. You can't make healthy litters with raw. You can't do all these things with raw. And I've done them all. I've done it more than once, and I've helped so many people do it. And, seeing the reversal of, diseases that is considered a miracle to have these outcomes. And it really is, at some point it's just a choice, right? It becomes a choice. And I'm at a point in my life, I think, where I used to be really, speak out and say it and fight back and fight for the dogs and do it. But you know what? Now I've decided that I just want to live through example. And, my clients also show me that these examples are real.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's better than arguing with people about it. So I find, and it's so much less stressful for me. So I really just, I want to help people understand it and do it properly when they really want to do it. And that includes veterinarians, that includes dog trainers, that includes, whoever wants to learn. I'm so happy. I could talk about it all day, as you can tell. But
it's great. I'm learning as we go along here.
Yeah. And I also have lots of things I like to, when I find a veterinarian that's really open, then I have tons of questions for them too. It's not like I'm the expert and I know everything. It's a exchange of knowledge and experience, and, people to people, right? And that's something that's very important to me is, I feel like we have dogs because, some of us have dogs because we, relate to them because they have unconditional love. And, horses too. I have horses as well, and cats. And I feel that, we need to have that same thing for people. Some of us forget that when we're fighting and, try to say who's right and wrong. And I feel like that's part of the process that I don't want to be involved in when it comes to, helping animals. I don't want to do it through fighting. I want to do it through just willingness and offering my energy and my time to people who want to learn it and want to understand it. Because I can't help dogs where there's so much resistance, right? I can't help where there's so much. And then it becomes so like you take it on yourself, and it's so stressful, and then you refer that to your own animals, and then so I've been really adamant about that. And I think it creates more space for people to be open as well. So, I always, give people the benefit of the doubt. You don't know until you know, right? You can't see it until you see it. And then once you see it, you can't really unsee it. So it really
Yes.
is just about creating those experiences and allowing that space for people to explore.
And accumulating those experiences as well. Yeah. So, for instance, I had a female pit bull. When she was 12, she was diagnosed with some skin cancer
Yes. Very
because every morning at 7:30, there is about a half an hour window where the sun is right by the gate, and she would lie there upside down and just sunbathe. And they said because of her age and everything, they don't really want to put her under. And I said, okay, well, if you know, if that time comes, let her go happy. She has been doing this all her life, right? And at 16, she was rushing the gate still.
Oh my goodness.
When people would walk by.
Yeah.
This is only in the later stages of her 16th year, she had gotten an enlarged heart and then fluid in the lungs, and then we had to make a decision at that point.
Yeah.
Because that was not something that was reversible, and I said, okay, I don't want her to suffer.
It's
But when people hear, wait, back up, your pit bull was 16?
Yeah.
Because normally the larger the dogs, the less they live. So, yeah, and she was happily rushing the gate at 16 while she carried around 4 years of skin cancer. It's like, how did this dog live?
Yeah, and it's a good example.
It's raw food, It's
less is more sometimes too, because the more you start to intervene with conventional immunosuppressive drugs, especially at a young age, even if the dog is on raw, there's other factors too, like how many antibiotic rounds have they had, how many vaccines have they had, what kind of, are they living in a stressful situation? Those are all determining factors of how your dog is.
Yes.
And I'm going to assume that your dog had mast cell tumors.
She had tiny little growths on her belly.
Yeah, which is a very common thing for pit bulls. And it's in a lot of those cases too. A lot of them have been exposed to a lot of sunshine. They have lighter colored skin. They're more susceptible, and they throw more histamine, which creates these tumors.
Right.
And I have so many cases where the owners have decided to not operate and not go down that route of taking them off and doing the drugs and stuff, and their dogs live very full and happy, healthy lives. It's just that C word, the cancer word, people panic, right? There's a lot of situations where people panic because they think it's an emergency situation. And, I see that a lot with antibiotic use as well. Like the number one most prescribed drug in the world, which is metronidazole, is an antibiotic that's given to animals that are suffering from chronic diarrhea or even short-term, very acute diarrhea. And then they give an antibiotic for that diarrhea. It clears up, then it comes back. And it clears up, and they give it again, and it comes back. So you start to sterilize the microbiome in the gut as your dog is trying to deal with this diarrhea. And then a lot of these cases come to me after they've had maybe 3 to 5 rounds of metronidazole, and their gut is completely sterilized, and they're having nonstop, explosive, terrible diarrhea, like every single day. And they can't even switch to raw because it's way too much bacteria in the raw food for them to switch to raw. So then we have to start with a cooked diet. And then from there, we slowly switch them into raw as we build their microbiome.
Wow.
And I see that so much And oftentimes when a dog comes to me with like irritable bowel disease, these chronic cases, it's because they've had all of this intervention and they're actually sterile, which is kind of what I was talking about in that skin article. Same thing can happen on the skin. So, and a lot of times if they have a lot of skin issues, they also are having internal.
After I read that article and I thought back, in hindsight, having some regret of all the treatments that I put Ninja through.
Well, and
So
said, you can only do
all the
what you know.
prednisolone and all the antibiotics and all the antibacterial, antifungal shampoos and all of that that we put him through. And I'm like, we went, which gets me to another topic that I wanted to touch with you, which is allergies, right?
Yes.
So then they said, okay, we can do an allergy test. I said, anything to help him, right? And so they took blood and sent it to a lab in the States, and I got back this fancy report where he's allergic to this and allergic to that, and it was like 6 or 7 different things. And one of the main allergens was beef.
Oh, yes. That's very common.
And I'm like, okay. It didn't quite make sense to me. Then the vet decided, okay, let's put him on an hydrolyzed food for a month. And then eliminate item by item and try to narrow down to what he is allergic to. I'm looking at the ingredients list of this food. I say, do you want me to feed this? It says, yeah, just for 1 month. You can go back to whatever you feed after, right? We're just doing this for a month. I said, okay. So I put down the bowl and I told my dog, I apologize in advance, but you're going to be eating this for a month. And so in this food, there is nothing in it. And if there's nothing in it, and my dog's condition does not change, then, it was all for nothing. So I said, okay, so if his condition didn't change, then let me try out this. So he's allergic to beef? That's what they're saying. Okay, so for 1 week and a half, I gave him nothing but beef. I gave him chunks, I gave him minced beef, I gave him beef in all forms, some beef liver, anything, just beef. And his condition didn't change 1 iota. Say, okay, so let's scratch that off the list. And then the next one. And then, so lamb, go to lamb. Nothing but lamb for a while. All the things that he was supposed to be allergic to, I gave him for a week and a half. And none of them changed anything. And it's like, so this allergy test is useless.
Yeah, so
it costs a lot of money, and it did absolutely nothing.
Yeah, I know, it's very expensive. I look at a lot of these tests. There's a lot of different ways to do the testing. There's the very expensive version, the blood testing through the veterinarian. A lot of my really serious allergy clients have also done the NutriScan, which is another one that is a saliva test. And then there are some hair testing ones that you can do as well. It's very interesting because oftentimes you'll see that these dogs, they have all of these tests, and blood versus saliva versus hair, the allergies are all different depending on where the tissue it was taken from. Then what often also happens is, they'll have the baseline test done, the first test done, and they'll change a bunch of things. Usually not seeing that much improvement, like you mentioned. And then they'll do a second test to compare to the first test. And that second test is often very confusing for people and for veterinarians because it's completely different from the first test.
Because of all the changes that were made.
So happening with that is, what my interpretation is that the immune system, if you think about the immune system, like we actually don't know a lot about it. We know a little bit. And what we do know about the immune system is it's a highly adaptable, dynamic system. So that means that it can change like that. So when you take a test for this blood test on this day at this hour, after dinner, after or no empty stomach, whatever it is, you're getting a picture, a snapshot of what the immune system is doing right at that very moment and what it's reacting to more here, there, at that moment. Then when you do the second test and you see, oh, look, it's so different, you're seeing a different snapshot, but they both could be true. You know what I mean? Because the immune system isn't fixed. It's not a static operation. Humans and animals are not static beings. We're so dynamic, energetically, physically, cellular level, all of these things. So to try and determine an allergy from a test like that is almost impossible. So that's one aspect. And then the other aspect that is a little bit funny in terms of the conventional process of dealing with food allergies, which are actually quite rare, is they go from one kibble to another kibble to another kibble, and they only look at the protein that's in that kibble. When there's 25 other ingredients in that food.
Only 25?
Maybe 100. If it's a really good one, like whole food one, maybe it has 25, right? So how the heck do you know what is it, the protein from the meat, or is it there's legumes, there's proteins in everything. There's proteins in plants. There's proteins in everything. So, and this is what allergies save an antibody to protein. We create an antibody which attacks that protein, right? And that becomes a saved memory. Like a virus is also made of protein, right? And that's how our immune systems will say, this is okay to come into the cell. This is an enemy, going to hurt us. And the more intelligent your immune system is based on your microbiome status, your dietary status, your cellular health, that determines how intelligent your immune system can be. If your immune system is completely overloaded with inflammation on every single system of your body, how well do you think that body can determine what is good for it and what is not? It's impossible. There's too much noise. There's too much noise, right? So when I see these highly inflamed animals, the first thing we have to do, take a look at their gut health. We have to take a look at how to reduce the overall systemic inflammation in this animal's body. And then once we've dealt with that in the ways that, cleaning up the diet is such a huge, it can clear up the picture so much. But if it doesn't, even if it doesn't, we still have information that is useful, because then there's something else besides diet that's actually contributing to this problem. Is it stress? Is it water? Some kind of something in the water? Is it something, do you live next to a farm that sprays their plants with glyphosate, or who knows, right? Like there's so many things that it could be from. So, and our bodies can pattern themselves to like, okay, now I have this, I'm overloaded with this toxin, or I'm overloaded with this allergen, or I'm overloaded with this thing, and then it gets tired. And the more tired it gets, the more inflamed it gets, and the more unable to deal with that external stress. So this is more of a holistic way of looking at health. But you could literally apply this information to any disease in humans and dogs and horses and cats. And this is how my mind works when I'm looking at a sick animal is not about, a test that got done, or it's like, what is, like, yes, it's nice to have diagnostics, but we also have to correlate that with everything else. The
Right.
very large picture, right? It's not about the protein that's in the kibble. That's very, very narrow.
And that is
right?
usually what happens.
Yes, it is. And I see that a lot. And people get like they get told that it's the meat protein in the food that's the problem. And that's doesn't make scientific sense, because everything has protein. Everything could be an allergen. Like anything could be an allergen. So unless you're putting that dog on a, like you did, totally beef diet, totally nothing else but that protein, and then you see it's not that protein, it's something else, right?
Yeah.
So you're explaining exactly what, it makes sense to me that, you wouldn't even necessarily be looking at food with this dog, because you're doing such a mono diet, and this dog is still having this major problem, right? So there has to be some other input and support and direction that you would have to take to determine what the cause is and how to help that dog.
I still don't know what the cause was. All I know is that 45 milligrams of CBD a day fixed it.
Yeah, which is so amazing. Sometimes these things are also generational. The microbiome status of the mother at the birth of the babies. For many generations, if the dogs have had their microbiomes destroyed over generations of dogs, it can really destroy that line.
Well, in his case, the parents and the grandparents were in country,
Right.
in the hands of the same breeder, who is also for over decades now feeds raw.
Interesting.
So, that's why
Must be something environmental. Something environmental.
Possibly. I don't know. I never got to find out what it was. All I knew is that with the CBD, it went away.
Amazing.
And I was just happy for that, and that was good enough for me at the time.
Yeah. And there are some, like, things you could determine just from the fact that was what helped him, and it's so interesting. Sometimes that can be like a reset for the endocannabinoid system in the body. Sometimes that's actually turned off and dysregulated, and that's actually the problem, right? Because we all have that system in our bodies, and that can get dysregulated. So CBD can, if that is the problem, often you'll see quite a difference in CBD. So sometimes you won't see that, and so you determine, okay, it's not that, it's something else, right? So it's great that you were able to kind of explore and just stay open, and then you found something that worked, which is like the ultimate goal, right? It's not about being right or wrong. It's just about what's going to.
I just wanted to help him. I just wanted to help him because, I was really close to that dog. I mean, the closest probably than all my dogs in those years. In those 40-something years, there's very few dogs that I got that close to. And now, within a short 2.5 years, I'm as close, if not closer, with Force, with my Rottweiler.
That's so cool.
So, we're goofing off all the time. He's a very serious dog. He's a dominant dog. He's if I take him to the vet, it actually is at the point where they can't really touch it.
Right. Yes, I have a dog like that too. I tell him I have to handle my dog.
He had a knee surgery, and even just for the X-ray, he had to be knocked out completely.
Yeah.
And even to knock him out, because that is something that's given IV, right? We had to tranquilize him first, so that I can then hold him for them to put the IV in.
He's a wild animal.
So they were. I think they were quite happy when I picked him up after, and didn't come back, because I think they were a little afraid of him. you
Yeah.
know, and he's a very serious dog, and
Yeah.
but I can do all those things. I mean,
Yeah.
he's giving me some resistance too, like with eardrops. He hates eardrops,
Yes.
you know. So if he does have an ear infection or something like that, and they put in the eardrops, so yeah, put 5 drops of each. Count what? No, it's a squirt. there's
Right?
there's a squirt in one ear, a squirt. That is what all
That's
you're
it.
getting.
That's all you're getting.
Because
Yeah.
he turns into, he's not aggressive about, he's not trying to bite me, but
Yeah. He's kind of.
he turns into an MMA fighter, right? He deploys Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. he's
And
he's
they
very powerful
working.
and twists and turns under your hand. It's difficult to hold on to him to get long enough to get the drops in, you know. So you just get to lift the ear and squirt, and then rub it in, and that's how it is with him. Yeah, but
Yeah, and that's
he's he's a wonderful dog,
makes
and
sense
he's
though,
is
right?
yeah, you know,
You gotta actually like this is another thing that is maybe not nutritionally related, but I see I saw a really good meme about it the other day. Like if you get a dog, if you get a breed specific dog that's a breed that then starts to show breed specific behaviors and you don't like it, that sounds like a you problem.
yes, 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 yes,
Because if you choose
absolutely.
a
If
breed
if
that's
you
like really bred to do this thing, this behavior,
anybody anybody who goes through my videos that I have on the social media, the free videos, they will hear me say it many times. Rottweiler is not for everybody.
no, no, no.
You have to be a certain type of person to successfully own a good Rottweiler. We're not talking
Yeah,
about a watered down version of it, but a true Rottweiler. You have to know what you're doing,
you do. It's not a good.
because you can end up in trouble real quick if you don't.
I
Because
know.
they will challenge you, and if you're not prepared to stand your ground, you have a problem, you know. And
You
that is
do.
the
You
and it's
very
the
much
type of
do.
dog that I like, you know.
Well, and for me, as like I'm a single female and I live by myself, and I really like to have a dog that can protect me.
Of course.
And that's why I put, not why, but one of the reasons I put so much into my dogs as far as training goes, as far as diet goes, because I want that longevity and I want that protection and I want that relationship to,
Yes.
put so much time in. And then, I've in my first dogs that I ever had, you put all this time in and then they die of cancer when they're 7. And you start
Hmm.
all over again. And, not only the heartbreak of losing that animal, but also like it's never the same in the two animals. It's always a different relationship.
Yeah.
And, then you start all over again. And the first 3 years are so intense. You got to put so much work in.
Oh yeah.
And, there's so much energy and so much effort. And, there's frustration and you have to, be creative and you have to learn how to get to know this dog, right?
Yeah.
And as they're shifting and their maturity and all of these things, right? So you're to invest in them just from day one is, such a pleasure for me when I get to do puppy cases because it's just so rewarding to me that this animal is going to have this entire like people buy pet insurance for their animals and i I just don't you know I never buy pet insurance for my animals, partly because I have so many of them. It will be like $1,000 a month for me to do
Mm.
that. But the best insurance that I can give them is, food and exercise and love, really. Honestly, like it's
Yeah.
very basic stuff, right? But, you know, I also look at dogs in terms of like from a dog's perspective. What is life like for the dog in my house? What is it being honored as a dog or is it being asked to be a human? This is another thing that's really important to me.
Dog
And
is a dog is a
I
dog.
have a lot of clients that have dogs that live in the city, they live in apartments, they're not living dog lives. And so this can be a very, very stressful situation for a dog. So you literally have to think of them as like an alien that came down from outer space. And you have to figure out how to integrate this dog into your human world so that they can still be themselves and express themselves, but also be comfortable in your world and you be comfortable having them in your world, right? So that's like a whole other energetic, stress related thing that I see with a lot of my clients. It's just why I can employ homeopathy in those cases, which is often. And it's interesting, oftentimes clients that come to me to see their dogs with a certain type of disease, the owners actually have the same disease as the dog. So think of how much the dog is taking on of our stress, of our, all of that kind of stuff. It's all this very energetic level, but also can be the source of disease too, right? So that's where, get a little bit more into like holistic land, but very important. And I think as a trainer, you would probably see that very clearly.
Yes.
You intimately see the relationship between people and their dogs. So,
or the absence of it.
Right. Yeah.
It's just sometimes you see dogs that people bring it for training, and then when I ask them to do something with the dog, it gets very awkward. So you want me to do what? Yeah. And you can tell it's the first time they have this dog on a leash and they're actually handling the dog.
Oh.
Yeah. And like, okay, this is gonna take a little longer than planned.
Yeah. You're actually more of a human trainer than a dog trainer in some senses.
Yeah. I always tell people the dogs are easy, right?
Right?
It's the humans are the complicated ones.
Right.
Because there's this natural resistance to change.
Yes.
And that is the problem. The dog doesn't have that. If I'm showing the dog, here, I want you to do X and you're getting this food, or I want you to stop this behavior or I'm going to tug on the leash. Yeah, the dog understands very quickly that what's good for it, what's not, what works, what doesn't. So the dog is on board really quick. Yeah, the dog is on board really, really quickly. Yeah. And then it's the human.
Yes.
That is most of the work.
I agreed. Yeah, I used to do the dog training. I used to do puppy classes and teach people how to pucker train their dogs. And I definitely had that same frustration. Like I can't create a relationship for you and your dog. You have to create a relationship with your dog. And if your dog doesn't take you seriously and you happen to have a Rottweiler, that's not a good thing.
Wrong breed. Wrong breed.
Wrong breed. Yeah.
Golden Retriever would have been a better choice.
Right? Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, and it happens a lot. It happens a lot. Right? So you can't, but it's a bit like, as my uncle always said, you can lead a horse to the water, but you can't force it to drink. Right? So you can only show people.
Good.
So there was times where I got the complaints, when you hear the dog is on his best behavior, and then the moment you walk out the gate, all hell breaks loose. I'm like, so if you do what I do, you get the same behavior that I get when I'm with your dog.
Yes.
That's as simple as it gets. It is as simple as I can make it for you. I say, I have no objection if you want to film what I'm doing with the dog so that you can go back to it. Great. Do that. Stand in the yard with your phone and check it out. You know, so you can go back and do the same thing and you will see the change in your dog.
Yeah.
But I can't do this for you.
No, you can't.
I teach your dog understands what's wanted, and then you have to make the dog want to do it for you. That is a you thing. You have to create that. I can't do this for you.
You get to see people's confidence levels, and that is a really cool thing about training animals and learning how to adapt. And it does make it easier. It does make you more adaptable, and it does break your ego right in half, like really does, because there's no two dogs that are the same. And
No,
I
never.
think with horses, right? Like I've trained quite a few horses in my life. I'm 40 years old. I've been riding since I was 7. I've ridden young horses. I've ridden all different breeds of horses, and I have a horse now that has been a very big challenge for me, and it's been a very big learning curve of like the difference between how it should be done versus what's actually working for this horse. And
Mm-hmm.
an animal that's 1,000 pounds who can just run you over or like kick you or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there's a whole other level of energetic respect that needs to occur, because they're flight animal, they're not a prey drive animal, and they're huge. So you're this tiny little thing in their space. So how do you communicate with them? It's only through energy, really, honestly. Like it doesn't have much to do with force,
No.
uh if you're very successful at it, right? So yeah, I do find that all of those, my dogs, my horses have taught me that I need to stop having an agenda. And my intention is what's the most important thing. And uh and also my intention to include this animal as a sovereign being, rather than like, you're gonna do what I say because this is my world.
It doesn't work with every animal.
No.
There's even some super dominant dogs where that would not work
Right. Totally.
because they will choose violence every time you challenge them.
You got it.
Right? So those
Yeah,
dogs, you just have to win them over.
we
You
do.
have to show them, I'm prepared to go down this road with you, but let's not.
Yeah, it seems like a
You
lot of
know, and then
energy.
there's some dogs that if you don't go down that road, you're
Yes.
also in trouble. So it depends on the individual, right?
Yeah.
And to me, the key is recognizing which one it is. I've met dogs. I've was called to a 3.5-year-old untrained male Rottweiler that has a problem with men.
Oh dear.
So when I came there to train the dog went nuts in the kennel. Then I got the owner to take him out. I said, "Does he know sit? Yeah, just put him in a sit and stand next to him." And then I moved sideways towards her and was standing next to her, and I just had a half-an-hour conversation with her. And the dog eventually calmed down a little bit. And I said, "Okay, let's walk forward." Then all three of us, side by side, started moving forward, and then we walked like big ovals in the yard.
Yeah.
And at some point in time, I said, when he's not looking, next time a car passes and he looks at the gate, hand me the end of your leash, but hold on to the other side.
Yeah.
And she did that. And then I said, okay, I want you to slow down now. Let go of the leash and slow down. So she let go, and then it was just him and me. And then he happened to look to the right, and he realized, oh shoots,
I'm
he's
walking with a guy.
and he's holding the leash. So he now has the power to control me. What do I do? So he rumbled at first, and I completely ignored him and just kept walking. And then I shortened the leash a bit, gave him a little tug to get closer to me. And he got closer and closer, and I was walking, and then I put the hand closest to him, just let it dangle next to me as I'm walking. And then I felt him sniffing it. And then eventually he nudged it, and then I just scratched him on the side of his cheek a little bit, just for a split second. Then a little longer, and a little longer, and then behind his head. Of course, not on top of his head, right?
Yes.
Because that would
Big
have been
no.
a mistake. And then I got to finish. The end result is I trained the dog.
Yeah.
And we actually bonded quite strongly, I must say.
Well, when you
You know,
take the time to recognize what the dog says it needs in that moment, what does it need? what does that dog, what are they telling you right now? They're telling you they have a need. And if you ignore that need, that's usually where the problems start, because then they don't trust you.
Yeah. In his case, what he actually had was a little bit of an insecurity, and he was just defensive about it.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't just
He needs somebody to
it
listen
wasn't
to.
downright fear. He was a confident dog, but his
Mhm.
nerve strength wasn't all that high. So he every time he gets spooked, he would choose violence to get out of it. And that is really where he was at, right? And once he realized there's not always a need to do this, then he calmed down overall, even with other guys that he saw. He
Yeah.
would watch them closely, but he would no longer be like, I want to eat you.
Lunging.
Yeah. So so he got a lot better
That's,
over the course of time.
yeah, it really is amazing. Like, it seems like, magic and dog whispering and horse whispering and things like this, but it really is just that person's ability to very intuitively, like, they're just tuned in. They know what the dog is saying. The dog doesn't have to speak. The dog is telling you a lot of things about what it needs every second. So you got to really slow down your own thought processes to be able to tune into that. And I think that's why animals are so therapeutic, right?
Sometimes little dogs, dogs this size.
Yes, the little tiny
This
one.
size. I think I had more of those trying to bite me than big dogs.
Oh, I agree. I've been bitten by more of those than
And oftentimes, you just keep moving forward and they back out and you back and you move forward, and eventually it's like you're the border collie and they're the sheep. You herd them into a corner, and when they realize, oh my god, I'm in a corner, so all that bravado didn't do anything for them, so they're shut down a little bit.
Yeah,
they're super stressed at that point in time, so you can't go overboard, but they're shut down for this split second.
Yeah.
And then you offer them food. Then you make yourself smaller and less intimidating. And you give some more food. And just give them time, hour and a half. And then
like,
and then you have them on the leash and say, come on, let's go for a walk.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden they kind of reluctantly walk with you. They have little flare-ups, and then the time between the flare-ups gets longer and longer and longer. And then eventually you come to a training session to that house, and he's greeting you by the gate with the tail wagging.
Oh.
Again, just insecurity, and has never learned how to cope with it. So,
and also, people are bad communicators when it comes to body language, and they don't actually, a lot of times, like, you really do have to, like, be very self-aware to know what you're saying to the dog in your body language. Because if you're really nervous or stressed, then you do tell your dog that, and your dog can become afraid because you're afraid, or because you're stressed, or because you're not confident, or
and
whatever.
And oftentimes it gets misinterpreted too. So, he's protective over me. No. He's using you as a strength magnet. He goes behind your legs or next to you. He draws some strength, feels more confident when he's close to you, and then lashes out.
Yeah, I know people like to put their versions of what the dog, the reasons why the dog is doing the behavior, which is also difficult because you can't change it if you think it's a certain way.
Well, that is the tricky part. Then convince people that no, it's not really this, right? It's really that.
Yeah.
And then make them see it. I think that is the biggest challenge in this.
It really is.
To make people see it, to get them to understand and to recognize it, so that the next time it happens, they know how to deal with it. So you show them a way. Okay, this is what you do when that happens, and then you get a phone call. Say, oh, it happened this week, and it did this, and he was quiet, and I could let somebody come into the apartment without getting bitten for the first time in 2 years. Great. Keep going.
Yeah. Well, that's the benefit of having someone that has experience, right? Because you can assess these things, seen them before, and you understand what the dog needs.
Yeah, and the same with food on your end, you know. It's,
Yes.
I learned a whole lot, you know, just in this conversation.
Oh, I'm really glad. Good.
And
Yeah,
yeah,
and I do a blog. You can check out if you want to go down the nerdy route. And I always put a lot of scientific articles attached to any. If I am making a statement about something, I always back it up with science. It's not just my opinion, it's not just my ideals. So I do have my own opinions at this point, but it's through my, education and clinical experience that I've gotten there. And I have had a lot of having to change my mindset, having to find new ways of doing things. That happens over and over and over and over again in any path, any learning process. And I think kind of that's why we're here, is to just keep always learning, right? So, and I think that just makes you better at whatever you decided to do. Is the more you explore it, the more you can understand it, the better you get at it. So, I really do try
true.
to have a very open mind, and also, really respect the needs of my people clients too, because they're coming to me with a problem, and it's not about making them feel bad about
True.
what's happening. It's about helping them both eat better and more comfortable and healthier, whatever, right? So um, I do feel like that's, whatever you decide to do, I think once that becomes your intention, then you're ready to actually teach other people. Because until you've had your own, ego implosion on these subjects that you're interested in, the rightness and the wrongness of things, and animals are so awesome at
They let you
throwing
know,
all
right? They let you
that
know
out the
right away.
window. They're like, no, that's not how life works at all.
They let you know right away when you go wrong. You can see
And
it
if you don't listen,
instantly.
then you just keep having the same problems over and over and over again, which is the definition of insanity, right?
I
So,
I come across dogs all the time that make me feel real stupid. Like
right?
I'm doing this for 46 years, but I've never came across one of you. You know?
Yeah. Which
And
is, I always look at that as such an opportunity when I have
yes, and
a little.
I embrace those, right? My wife always asks me, so you get so attached to your dogs, you get so extremely close to your dogs, and you are so devastated when they go. Like I
Yes.
can't function for a week. Like when Ninja passed on, I was out of it for a week.
Yeah.
You know, didn't want to talk to people,
Yeah.
and I have to, right, in my job. And so why do you put yourself through that over and over? I said, babes, the only time that I'm without a dog is when I'm dead.
Right.
And then
Yep.
I meet all the ones that I had. Right?
Yes.
I go for the big reunion, right?
Yes.
Because I will go for it every time again. Because I believe that every dog that I have is there to teach me something.
Oh,
And when they're done teaching is when they move on.
right. Yep.
You know?
Totally. Totally true.
And so I will never be coming to Trinidad in April and getting my rescue rod in
Sure.
October. You see that time in between was the most miserable time of my life because I did not have a dog. I was only half a human at that point. It's just like I can't be without a dog. It's just, I can't see life without a dog.
Yeah, I feel the same way, and I also feel that way about horses too. Yeah, it's
I
once
was
you have them, it's like, how I am now.
I was supposed to be working with horses really when I was a child. Yeah, my grandmother wanted me to learn how to show jump horses.
Oh, really?
Yes, and took me to a
That's a big
stable
one.
and put me on the horse, and I loved it. Was a huge female. I mean, in Germany, the horses are not short, right?
I haven't done horse, so I know.
Fairly tall, and I was what 6 years old, and I'm on top of this horse, and I'm hugging the neck, and I love it. I didn't want to come down, and on the way home, on the backseat of my father's car, I almost died of an allergic reaction because my bronchial
Oh,
system just
no.
closed up. So I ended up in the hospital.
Oh dear.
And then the doctor told me, okay, he's allergic to animal hair and to keep him away from animals.
Oh no.
And my father's like, all animals? Well, yeah. We have dogs. Yeah, well, all animals. Dog, fat chance of that happening. I can't keep him away from dogs. He'll find a way, and say, okay, then just restrict it to dogs. And, he will over time desensitize. And I spent time in allergy clinics and all that, and learn how to control my breathing under stress and all those things in the pool. And
yes,
they put me in a glass box and blasted me with all kind of things to see what exactly I'm allergic to, and then vacuumed it out and gave me medication to fix it, and felt like a guinea pig. But I stuck with dogs, and I'm glad I did.
They're very, very important. Sounds like they're a very important part of your life. So
they are my life. It's my family and my dogs.
And are you allergic to them now?
No. Well, horses, I'm a lot more tolerant. So if in Trinidad we have carnival and there's police horses, so when they go through the crowd, and I always feel sorry for the horses in this heat as well as the riders. So during carnival time, I buy a bunch of bottled water, and I give some to the riders, and I ask them if they would allow me to give to the horse, and then I cup my hand and pour some water for the horses.
I regret it.
And just touch the nose a little bit. I feel it a little bit after.
Yeah.
But it's no longer the life-threatening thing.
Yeah, usually it's the first time.
And I just walk with a Ventolin inhaler when I do this. Yeah. Just in case. And but I can't work with them. I can't make it that intense. I trained a dog on a horse farm, and I felt it.
Oh yeah.
So I stayed in a different part of that farm with the dog when I was working it to make sure. But it's not as bad as it was then.
Our bodies decide to make an antibody, a real antibody to something, and really be difficult to change that.
Yeah.
I know. I have asthmatic allergies too. I have many tools that I use to reduce the reaction that I have when I have a problem, but I do have inhalers, and occasionally have to use them, and that's but it's very few and far between. I have to say, a lot of people have problems where they have to take it every day, and at one point I was having that happen, and I was very determined to reduce, use it for emergencies only, or going into an emergency. So but that's also mind over matter stuff too, right? And
that's part of it. It's the not panicking part.
Wim Hof, you know Wim Hof. I do his methods, breathing methods, and cold showers, and I haven't quite made it to the ice bath stages, but I would like to get there at some point. But all of those things have been really helpful for that, and something that we can do as humans that not necessarily we can teach for a dog. But yeah, definitely we can kind of heal ourselves on those more mind related levels. We have a lot more mental pathology in our bodies as well, which is a whole other topic.
Yeah. That is a whole another show.
Another day, I would say.
All right. So I have one last nutrition related question. that
Of course.
I wanted to ask you before we wrap up.
Sure.
There are different activity levels in a dog.
Good.
There's times where training is more intense, there's times where it's less. So if you feed a certain amount of raw food, if you know you're going to increase the activity level of the dog, do you increase all ingredients or do you just increase certain ingredients?
That's a good question. First, I feel like a lot of people are afraid to change the feeding amount that they're doing on a daily basis, which is like, I feed based on how much energy my dog is expelling. She goes for a 3-hour hike. She's going to get probably almost twice as much as she would on a normal day, right? So there's that. So in that sense, I would just increase her entire food, like her meals, whatever she's destined to get that week. I'm just double the whole meal. And then I also use a lot of extras that are like high energy extras. So when she was training very heavily with like, she was doing agility, tracking, and a dog diving all in the same week, right? She'd do one of each week, and then she was on a farm and she's running around everywhere. So she, at one point in her training, I think as a 3 or 4-year-old, she was eating about 4 pounds of food a day. And it was quite difficult to keep weight on her with more meat-based diet because you have to feed so much protein. Plus, protein and fat are really where the energy is coming from for dogs. But if you use very low glycemic vegetables, you can also add for these dogs that are doing these crazy sports where they're like, it's not like a house dog, like they're like sculling, like explosions of energy and so much more energetic need. It's the same with like an athlete, like a human athlete. If you give them very, very high quality carbohydrates, which dogs in the wild do eat on their own, then you can create energy that way as well. So our main 3 things that we would do would be like pasture raised eggs. I would do duck eggs as well because they're higher in fat. Extra fish, like I do canned sardines, packed in water, not in oil. And I would give her up to like 6 of those cans of meat, which is like 600 grams. And that has a lot of really good, like those omega-3 fats, but it's also like high calorie. Lots of really nice minerals in there as well that are difficult to get if you're just feeding land animals. And then I would also some people use like really, really well cooked quinoa, which has got protein in it, but it's also got some really nice carbohydrate that is usable for animals that are doing these very, very, very crazy top level sports where they're like huge muscle mass, super athletic. Like, I know some people are super like not for brains, but in my experience with my dog as a working dog, I would include she loves yams, like baked sweet potatoes and yams. So I would bake those in the skin. And then I would feed her like a half a yam or a third of a yam with her meals. And that was one of the only ways that I could keep up with like keeping her condition the way that I wanted it to be. Because the only reason to feed a high quality carbohydrate on a regular basis like that would be with these explosive, energetic, like athlete type of exercises, right? So I would include those on the days when she was dock diving and when she was doing agility because she just using so much energy so quickly. And if I didn't, then she wasn't able to build muscle the same. So those carbohydrates give them enough energy during those times to be able to use all the protein and the fat and all the other good things to actually build muscle. So instead of just using it as caloric energy, right? So then you get better body conditioning, and you can see it in your dog. Like you can usually see like how much do I need to add or not add, if they're getting heavy, if they're, you especially as a trainer, you know exactly what you want your dog to look like.
Yes.
So, and if they don't look like that, then you kind of adjust things. And so, those extras, canned oysters are also really great for mineral intake, more than energy. Like they do have protein in them too. Um, if you're going to use quinoa, it has to be like super, super cooked, like mushy, like not like you would eat it, but like very digested already, because it's got a very hard casing on it. It's very hard for dogs to digest, even hard for some humans to digest, which I found out when I started eating it, and I had terrible gut pain because I didn't cook it long enough. Um, so those are good ways to add energy. I do, and I've had some cases of dogs that have had like very long bouts of diarrhea where they lose weight. And one of the ways that we get them back is, well, abstaining from antibiotics, switching them slowly onto a cooked diet, but lots and lots of pumpkin, lots of squashes cooked, um, yams, sweet potatoes, because they're so high in prebiotic fibers. And then as you're changing the food, you're also doing the probiotics, you're doing the prebiotic fibers, and then you can slowly switch them over to. And I think that a dog that's an athlete has a different microbiome than a dog that's living in a city, basically, like, or a dog that's living on a farm. They have a completely different microbiome than a dog that's living in a city, right? So that also kind of plays a part. So you can also look at their poops to see what you want that to look like, um, and your dog's energy level is really important.
What is the ideal consistency as we're talking about food?
Depends on what they eat. So there's like kind of a range. There's a really cool girl, and I don't know what her name is, but she's on Instagram, and her tag or her handle is Raw Feeding Movement, I think. And she has this graph of poo that I love, that is all like raw feeding poo. That's like the range of what poos will look like based on what you feed. And so it is variable, especially if you're doing like lots of variety with your dog's diet. You're going to see a range, but you don't want loose poops. You don't want a lot of mucus in the poo. Like every once in a while, a mucusy poo maybe happens, but mucus is a sign of inflammation in the gut. So you want to, if that's going on for several days, then you would want to, pay attention, probably give them some marshmallow root, some anti-inflammatory like gut supportive herbs, maybe some homeopathy, things like that. Take a look at what they're eating, maybe adjust. You can put bone broth in. It's another really good extra, really hydrating, really high in collagen, super great for the gut, super great for the joints and bones. It's just all around awesome, as long as it's like bone broth that you make from bones. Um, and yeah, so like if they've eaten a chicken, you're going to see a different poo, which we kind of said before, like it's a lighter, crumblier, but it shouldn't be so hard that it's hard to pass. So if you're finding that you're feeding raw and your dog is getting constipated or having these very dry stools where they're kind of incompletely pooping and then pooping many, many, many times, to try and get their poops out, it means probably too much bone in the diet. And that's a good way to check to make sure you're either feeding enough bone or you're not feeding. You're not feeding enough bone or you're feeding too much. Because that's really the best way to tell if you're feeding enough calcium, especially younger dogs, because you can feed them up with like lots of prey things, but if they're getting constipated, you need to add some more meat organs into them. So So poo is like a very useful tool to understanding what, how to adjust the dog's diet. And some people are really against feeding vegetables to dogs, but, through my research with the wolves and the coyotes, they do eat a lot of plants, but they eat them in very specific ways and very specific times. And then, with the squashes and the pumpkins and things like that, we can use those intermittently because we know that they do have health benefits. But we're also kind of using that in cases where either they're having a crazy high workload or they're having some kind of like very serious digestive issue that we are trying to resolve. Those are kind of the reasons that we use those types of vegetables. And then like grasses and green leafy vegetables, fermented fruits and fermented root vegetables. Those types of things are actually very natural for adults to eat. So those can all be added as extras. Eggs,
Eggs raw or cooked?
all of them. Eggs I usually feed them.
Raw?
Yeah, because if you cook them, it does degrade the value of, like,
Okay.
especially vitamins.
And how often should a dog get egg?
Depends on their size. So I would say, like for my 80-pound dog, she gets. We have chickens here, so
Right.
it's kind of based on how many the chickens are laying at certain times of the year. They're
No,
laying.
what I meant was how often per week? Is it every day in the food, or is it every two or
I
three
don't do
days?
okay. I usually do like I rotate. I'll probably do it for 3 to 4 a week with her.
Okay.
Dogs, I could probably have up to 6.
Okay.
Uh, and then make her canned sardines. She gets 3 to 4 cans a week, but when she was younger, she would get like 6 to 8 cans or like the frozen mackerel and sardines like that. So yeah, and a lot of those things I would consider them extras. So I get this question a lot. So what I decided to do is I'm releasing an ebook on my website on November the 15th, and it's going to be kind of a cheat sheet. It's going to have some recipes for like home balanced, like APCO friendly raw diets, but also a rotational cheat sheet of extras, like food extras that are species appropriate for dogs that can be rotated in. And I put them into categories so that, you have a whole list of like omega-3s and a whole list of like super green foods and a whole list of like berry powders and like veggies, probiotics, and omega-3s, all these different categories, and then all the foods that are the species appropriate food for dogs that would be in that category, so that you're not overlapping. Like, say you're doing like, 3 from the same category. You don't need to do 3 from the same category, right? You can do like, say, in the greens, where some people are doing like kelp and alfalfa and wheatgrass powder and all these things that are doing all every single day. Whereas what I usually do is I'll get one of those, I'll do that until the bag's done, and then I'll rotate on to different to base the, because kelp, for example, you use kelp all the time, you can actually give them iodine. But if you give them no kelp, then they can have too low iodine. And iodine is extremely important. You can overdo it and you can underdo it, right? So that's the beauty of the patient beauty. But some people, it's hard to categorize. Like, what are these? Like, unless you're a nutritionist, you don't know the nutritional profiles of all of these foods and how to overlay them to not overdo. So that's been one of my to-do lists for quite some time. There's going to be a downloadable PDF that I'm going to have available for people so that they can really like not only just do the basics of raw, like, the meat and everything, but like, how do you actually like gave this dog really amazing diet without without having to have all of the math, because I like to do the math, but not everybody wants to do it. So trying to make it easier for people.
That's great. Now I will definitely look out for that ebook.
Yeah, I'll let you know when it comes out.
That
November
would have,
15th. Follow me on Instagram. We'll see.
I do.
Great. Excellent. I think I will find.
Right.
I think I saw you on there, so I will add you to there so I can see what you're up to.
All right. Well, Sarah, it's been an absolute blast.
Yeah, me too.
I had a really good time talking to you, and we've been at it for 2.5 hours now.
Yeah,
Almost.
you even feel it.
Yeah. And I'm super grateful that you agreed to do this.
I'm very happy to come on.
Learned a lot, and now in a position to feel more confident in what I'm telling people. Because before it was okay, this is what I do,
Yeah.
and try and get people to do some of it, and I feel much better knowing that not all of it was wrong.
No, you're doing a great job.
So that yeah, and I will send people your way if they want to get more into it.
Awesome. Oh, I am taking.
I'll get them to check you out, and
yeah, my blog is a great